Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, anti-Semitism in the United States. After a mass shooting of Jewish worshippers in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, what should be done to address hatred against American Jews?
If you have a connection to this story or want to share your thoughts on how to tackle anti-Semitism, we want to hear from you. Send us a comment live on YouTube or on Twitter.
In the aftermath of the Pittsburgh Synagogue shooting, what should be done to fight anti-Semitism in the US? 11 people were killed last month in what has been described as the deadliest attack on Jews in the United States. The alleged gunman, a white man named Robert Bowers, told authorities that he wanted all Jews to die and that they were committing genocide to his people. Hours before the shooting, Bowers also posted an online rant aimed at a Jewish American organization that helps refugees move to the US. In the States, anti-Semitic incidents increased by 56.7% in 2017. That's according to the Anti-Defamation League. Jewish American groups that track anti-Semitism blame the surge on political rhetoric that emboldens white nationalists and online environments that easily allow Jewish conspiracy theories to flourish. So today we want to understand why anti-Semitic ideas persist.
Well, with us to discuss this in New York, Talia Lavin. She researches online extremism at Media Matters for America. In Pennsylvania, Rabbi Mark Goodman. He is the spiritual leader of the Brit Shalom Jewish Center and lives in Pittsburgh. Also in New York, Tara Isabella Burton. She is a historian and covers religion for Vox. Welcome everyone to the stream.
It's really good to have you here. I wish it was under a better circumstances, but what an excellent opportunity to be able to really unpack what's happening in the US right now. For our audience, I want you to look at my laptop here. This is the Anti-Defamation League. I mentioned them in our introduction. Look at their mission: to stop the defamation of the Jewish people, to secure justice and fair treatment to all. Set up in 1913. The shocker is, if we look at the past year, the number of anti-Semitic attacks or incidents that they registered, over 3,000, and registered is the word here. Who knows what other ones there might be. The bigger the bubble you see here, the more the instances, and they go from extremist murders, terrorist plots, police shootouts, white supremacist events, propaganda, anti-Semitic incidents. Rabbi, I'm thinking, just looking at this, and the increase, and that's just the ones and the attacks and the incidents that we know about. If I asked you why this was happening, would you be able to give our international audience an answer?
Oh, it's a difficult question to answer. The simple answer, I suppose, for why anti-Semitism is on the rise is that right now in America, our rhetoric and our dialogue have gotten really toxic and really negative. It comes from the situation in politics. It's related, of course, on some level to some of the things that the conversation around immigration. And I'll just highlight one direct connection that your viewers and watchers online may not be aware of, but the individual that attacked Tree of Life Synagogue a week and change ago was directly responding to an event that was held in the Jewish community nationwide called National Refugee Shabbat, in which congregations all over the country were speaking about immigrants and refugees. And this disturbed individual was really upset that Jews who historically come from immigrant communities and emigrated to the United States over the last 100 years in large numbers, 120 years, he was upset that we were supporting that kind of work. And he thought that meant that we should be hurt and killed. And that's just one instance, but if you want to go way back, anti-Semitism has been part of American history going back hundreds of years.
Tara, what we're talking about today is anti-Semitism in the US. And can you help us understand what makes it different in the United States as opposed to perhaps across in Europe, or in the UK, or in France, which also has issues of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism attacks? What's different in the US?
Sure. Well, absolutely. I think that there's a long legacy of similarity in narratives between Europe and the United States in terms of this sort of pernicious conspiracy theory that we see and have seen surrounding the Tree of Life shooting, that the Jew as the puppet master, the globalist who's secretly controlling world affairs. That's, of course, not new or not unique to the United States. But absolutely, I think in the age of Trump in particular, the way in which white nationalists and white supremacists in this country more generally have allied with themselves with anti-Semitism alongside other forms of racism, alongside other forms of nativism, is very much tied into this particular cultural moment. And I don't think we can talk about the anti-Semitism in the United States without talking about the way in which Trump has consistently legitimized anti-Semitic sources, narratives, and ideas.
For example, give us one.
So around the time of the confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court nominee who was accused of a number of instances of sexual assault, Trump suggested that those who were protesting the nomination had been given money by George Soros in order to protest and basically destabilize the democratic process. And by doing that, Trump very much dog whistled, very unsubtly as it happened, a narrative that we've seen many times before in history, that a mysterious Jewish billionaire is somehow using his money to destabilize democracy. And that is something that goes back at least to the late 18th century, if not earlier. So very much, I think Trump is sort of plugging into centuries-old conspiracy narratives and I wouldn't say quite whitewashing them, but removing them from context and then allowing them to enter and re-enter the public sphere, where in turn they trickle down into the ears of listeners like Robert Bowers.
Now, Tara, you mentioned Trump, and you also mentioned the billionaire philanthropist George Soros, and you were on the same wavelength as several of our community members. So I want to play a comment we got from Rabbi Danya Rutenberg, a rabbi and author, who says, just as you did, that this is not new, and this idea of using Jews as a target for people's rage and anger is something we've seen time and time again. Here's what she told the stream.
The Trump administration has been using this method to great effect, right? Spinning conspiracy theories about how Soros is paying for everything, talking about globalists again and again. It's more of a foghorn than a dog whistle. And so then people, both on the right and the left, have their attention focused on, sometimes on Jews and a story about Jews, rather than on who's holding power, which is white supremacist men in this country.
So Talia, just to make it clear for all of our audience, make the link for us between white supremacy and anti-Semitism, because clearly there are several people online who are already making that link.
Yeah, so this is something that I've definitely written about. I think the important point to emphasize is that white supremacy in the United States and anti-Semitism are not extricable. They're intimately interconnected. And if you look at white supremacist rhetoric dating from, the 1930s to the present day, the general gist of it is that while minorities and people of color are to be feared and to be shunned and attacked, the white supremacist narrative is that it is Jews who organize and fund and sort of nefariously orchestrate the activities of minorities and people of color. And we've seen that as the motivation for white supremacist violence, both in the case of Robert Bowers, who felt that Jews were seeking to dilute the white race with quote-unquote invaders. And, we've seen that in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 30s and 40s, when white supremacists in the South, who were segregationists, blamed Jewish communists for funding the NAACP in order to promote race mixing and miscegenation. The same theories led a group called the Order, or the Silent Brotherhood, to murder Jewish talk radio host Alan Berg in 1984. So again, these are old theories. It's just I just want to there's a theory there's a conspiracy theory called white genocide, which is incredibly popular on the far right internet and across the world, which posits directly that Jews are orchestrating the dilution of the white race's purity by encouraging immigration. And again, and that's something that the openly nationalist, openly anti-immigrant Trump administration has encouraged in many different ways, including sort of winking references to their rhetoric and not so winking references.
Okay. All right. I hear you. Rabbi, go ahead. I can see you're thinking and about to say something. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think that point was really interesting in that it brings up a larger conversation that Jews often have with each other, which is whether we are white or whether we are Jews, and what the difference is between that. And I think Talia raises this interesting point that because Jews are sometimes affiliated and aligned with communities of color and immigrant communities, we sometimes bear some wrath from white nationalists or people on the far right who prefer this country be either exclusively white or keep its population exactly the way it is right now, since almost everybody except the Native Americans came to this country somehow. But on the other hand, we as predominantly white-skinned individuals, as Jews are in America predominantly, we can pass and we can slide by. And if I'm not wearing this, then I can get by as nothing else. When I was up in my congregation in Erie this past weekend, I wore my baseball cap when I was out. And the reason was twofold. One is that I'm a little nervous there that that city, which doesn't have a very large Jewish population, might react negatively to a Jew, but also because I live in Pittsburgh, and when people ask, oh, you've got a little funny hat, are you Jewish, where are you from? And I have to say I'm from Pittsburgh. It's a whole conversation about trauma and struggle right now that I may not want to dump on somebody else.
There's also, and Guess you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's also, if we're looking at the sort of far-right white supremacy theories here about Jewish people, that they don't even consider them to be white. Not just their affiliation with people of color and assisting people of color and being allies, but they actually don't think that don't think the Jewish people are white. So this is a conspiracy theory that I have trouble getting my head around. Help me out.
If I can jump in here and then, so I think one way that you can really see the fact that white supremacists don't consider Jews white is through two really popular white supremacist and extremist slogans. So there's something called the Echo, which it features kind of putting the names of Jews in 3 parentheses. You might have seen this on Twitter or Facebook. And then there's an extremist slogan called Name the Jew. Naming the Jew, which refers to pointing out nefarious Jewish influence, and also pointing out who in organizations are Jewish. So you'll see these graphics of, CNN, NBC, the New York Times that point out, put photos of Jewish stars over Jewish reporters, and I think that this this points to a well-known white supremacist trope, the idea that Jews are almost like secret agents whose goal is to destroy whiteness from within. That we are even more of a threat because we are white passing.
Sure. I hear you. I just wanted you to say that rather than me just to share that with no sort of solid background behind it. This is quite jarring because I want to look at people who went to synagogue a couple of weeks ago and didn't leave, because we're talking about how did we get here in the United States with the Jewish communities or Jewish communities. And Rabbi, you were intimately connected to Pittsburgh and to this synagogue, as you explained to us a little bit earlier. and then this happened. So we can have all of our various theories as to why there is a rise in anti-Semitism, but then how do you deal with a massacre like this?
No, you're going to make me cry. I was in synagogue last week with my 6-year-old daughter. We went on a full lockdown, and we interrupted the traditional Jewish service by praying for what was happening. We opened up the book of Psalms, and we went through a number of Psalms that are in our liturgy that are meant to kind of be there in times of strife and trouble. And we weren't allowed to leave synagogue until the police could tell us that we were all safe to go. And then, we kind of learned the horrible truth. And then a few days later, I was asked, because the rabbinic community, the Jewish community here in Pittsburgh, it's very small, and there's only so many people who are able to cover for a massive tragedy like this. There were 11 funerals and 11 what are called shivas, which is a 7-day mourning period. And there were literally not enough rabbis to go around, and they asked me to cover a shiva for one of these families. And the sense of trauma in the room, I mean, first of all, you've lost a beloved uncle, grandfather, spouse, brother. But on top of that, it's a normal death because you've lost someone, and it's a not normal death because it's tragic and traumatic, it's public, it's national, and it's motivated entirely by hate. And that, I think, we didn't talk about it. I don't think we were ready to deal with the fact that this isn't a series of deaths. This isn't a series of even murders. This is a series of murders based on what our identity is, who we are, and in a place of extreme peace. A synagogue is a place where people come to pray. And the last thing I'll add to this is these were the best of us. These were not just people who are Jews and are observant Jews and Jews who come to synagogue, but the synagogue service starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. The murderer broke in at 10 o'clock in the morning. These are the people who come early, who set up, who put out coffee, who lead the service, who know all the songs, who know all the words. And these were the best of us. These were the people who are the warmest and most giving of their time and energy. And they reach out to faith communities all over the world and all over the country. And to lose those holy souls, those spirits, it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart every time you see someone else in Squirrel Hill, in the neighborhood I live in, where everybody knows somebody who was killed. Everybody knows somebody who goes to synagogue with somebody who was killed. Everybody themselves was in synagogue and feeling threatened. Just stepping back into synagogue on Saturday was hard for a lot of us.
Rabbi, thank you for sharing your experiences with us, and of course our condolences to you and your community. I want to share a few reflections from others in your community because, as you said, everyone knows someone because it's such a small community. So AJ Irwin here on Twitter says, I work at a coffee shop a few blocks away from the Tree of Life Synagogue. This morning we received a call from families in Newtown, Connecticut, who were affected by the Sandy Hook school shooting, donating money to our coffee shop to give free drinks to the Squirrel Hill community, and that was November 3rd. She goes on to say, telling the stream, that I honestly never felt as if anti-Semitism was a national issue. Maybe because I've been isolated within the safety of this community that is so overwhelmingly accepting of all religions. If anything, I believe this event has shown how easily hate can be masked. And so it is on that note, masking hate and what that is like to live in a community that is so welcoming and then to be reminded that the outside community is not, that I want to share this video comment from Dr. Abigail Oren. She's a writer and historian in Pittsburgh, and this is what she had to say.
As I learned the news that 11 of my fellow Pittsburgh Jews had been murdered in an anti-Semitic attack, I sobbed. Yes, for my community, which is so close-knit that these losses touched most everyone, but for another loss too, the loss in my belief that Jews in the United States were not so vulnerable. I'm a historian of 20th century American Jewry, and I've devoted years to studying the ways that Jews have built relationships with other threatened communities to support civil rights and social justice movements. But I've also been really critical of moments when Jews have chosen to protect their own interests rather than support anti-racism and other social justice causes. Whether it's buying a house, voting, or interacting with the police, white Jews, and no, not all Jews are white, but Jews with lighter skin have benefited in ways that their neighbors of color have not.
So Tara, I want to direct that to you because she mentioned some points that we've already discussed, but you can hear the emotion in her voice, of course, and I know this is something that anyone who's listening with half a heart can relate to and feel the sadness that she feels and that the rabbi feels. What's your take on this?
Well, I think I can speak to this. I am actually from a mixed Jewish and Christian family, and so absolutely, I'd say that I grew up somewhat insulated. I grew up in New York City, a very liberal place, with a sort of passing for non-Jewish. I don't have a Jewish name, but grew up very much in a family that celebrated Jewish holidays together, and then separately with another side of my family, Christian holidays. So I think it is absolutely true that for some of us who did grow up in particularly sheltered pockets of America, this was not perhaps immediately apparent. But I think that just goes to show, how insidious and pernicious anti-Semitism is, that it can bubble below the surface, but also that in our current moment, technology from social media, both mainstream sites like Twitter and far-right sites like the Gab, allow a lot of this hatred that is perhaps bubbling under the surface to proliferate, become public, and to find other adherents and increase the number of people being radicalized. And I know Talia has done a lot of research on this.
I just want to share this with you because this happened from the Department of Justice in the US 2 days after the massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And have a look on my laptop here. The Department of Justice announced a new hate crimes website. This is not a coincidence, obviously. Rabbi, other than the Department of Justice thinking, okay, we need to do something, what else is happening after these tragic deaths?
Well, synagogues are rethinking security, and then the broader conversation in America, of course, has to do with guns and who should be armed and how armed they should be and when they should be armed and who should be disarmed, and that's a really difficult conversation to have because it's one of the areas where the Jewish community is split. I think there are not down the middle. I think most Jews are in favor of increased gun control and the government recognizing that there are people who are too dangerous to own guns and they really shouldn't have them. But there are always those people in our communities who think that we as a synagogue community or we as an organized Jewish community need to be able to protect ourselves better. And that means arming ourselves. That makes me really uncomfortable. One of my colleagues said it really well the other day, which is, synagogues are supposed to be welcoming places. It's supposed to be places where we want people to come in. We want people to feel comfortable. We want people to feel our love and our warmth. We don't want a series of blast doors and metal detectors and armed guards in order to come in and pray. So that's the bigger, more difficult conversation. I would just like it if our government could connect the dots between the hate speech folks and the gun people. If you are someone who is posting dangerous, violent, anti-Semitic, anti-Black, anti-gay rhetoric online, and you're known to own a dozen guns,
sure,
you should have a giant red flag over your name.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to wrap up the conversation on the website of the Tree of Life Synagogue, and they list the funerals that have been, the funerals that are coming up. And just one line here that really stuck out at me. The support shown worldwide proves that love truly is stronger than hate. An amazing sentiment, because after this conversation, it's really hard to think like that. But that's what the website of the synagogue, where 11 of their congregation was actually killed. Malika, how's this conversation going down online?
People are pointing a finger at the head of the country. Mike says it's quite difficult to fight anti-Semitism when it's being propagated from the highest offices in the country.
That's all the time we have for today's show. Guests, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you online. Take care.